my newest lessons in Swahili. Nina furaha kuwa hapa katikati yenu. Does that work? Yes. Habari zenu? Habari za asubuhi? Karibu. I passed the exam? Yes. First class or failure? I want to stand on existing protocols, but I had time during the pause to have informal handshakings, one with my Swahili teacher, who is also the president of the private universities, Professor Kisao Mumo. I was able to shake hands with teachers from Strathmore University. I met the Vice Chancellor of Egerton University and of course of Scott. I met Joseph here in the hall of Tangaza. I even shook hands with someone who works at the Multimedia University. My host, as I sleep and eat here, is the director of CORAD sitting in front. I was delighted to meet the gentleman from UNESCO. And since yesterday, moving through the halls of this university, I met someone like Professor Shem and sister who are in the educational and postgraduate studies. I met a lot of many other hands, not to talk of Justus himself and his wonderful team of teachers. I've worked together with two Peters in one. Normally we talk about Peter and Paul, but two Peters in one, Mbaro and Gishure, that is two stones that are too heavy to crack. It is a great pleasure from Globe Ethics in Geneva to share this training workshop, which would be an asset for all of us who are participating. And Professor Justus Mbaye has really made, since we started cutting each other right back last year in Geneva, where he was part of the membership of the founding of the Consortium on Ethics in Higher Education in our interventions and curriculum, appointing one of his as a member of our steering committee. It's been Kenya on the spotlights. Upon arriving in Kenya, I saw a beautiful marriage of President Uhuru Kenyatta and his wife, an elderly man wearing white. They dashed him some padded breasts, and he had white hair on his head, and it looked like the hot situation in Kenya had come to a gradual end. So we are in safe territory. But what I found fascinating was that for the national interest, politicians must move beyond the Mawa, what we call the Mawa, the boundaries, and shake hands in spite of all the differences. So Kenya is a country of respect. It is on the eastern coasts of Africa, but when we look at the indices, which I will be showing to you as I move through the slides, you will discover, ladies and gentlemen, that there is much more work to do. Having said that, permit me to add a few comments. The first being that for those who have responsibility to assist and guide the young, we are talking about teachers. You are a blessed group. To be a teacher is to be a rabbi. To be a rabbi is to be a model. To be a model is to be reputable. Therefore, you may not count your greatness as a teacher in financial resources, but the wisdom you share. And even having listened to the speakers before me, starting from Emmanuel, from Amasia, our Reverend Father, who did a great work, and all the other speakers from Arigato, even from UNESCO, you will see that being a teacher places you in a position to be the strongest, because all those who run institutions worldwide, whether they are bankers or businesses, whether they are priests or professors, whether they are politicians or parliamentarians or lawyers or family people, all these pass through institutions where teachers certify them. So you have the key to the professions of people worldwide. And the teacher, therefore, is strategic. No wonder when you look at where do you impact more in terms of changing the values of a society. You can go to the House of Parliament and make the laws, but there is someone who integrates them, who passes them on. They are normally the teachers. And the teacher is not only in the classroom, the teacher starts already in the family, where papa and mama and uncles and aunts and all those who guide the young define the future. It is great that CURE here on the East Coast is taking this challenge, and I want to thank those teachers who not only for today, but for the next 4 days will be part of sharing resources, skills, and content with which they become stronger in their work. A teacher is a thought leader, and the world needs leaders of thought. When you are a leader of thought, then you pass on values that live beyond you. What we do at globeethics.net in Geneva is to build what we might call a coalition around the topic of values and ethics. We have here in East Africa a regional office, here located in CURE, even involving St. Paul's University and Technical University and others. We have, for example, in South Africa, in UNISA, one university with 350,000 students. Think about it. And then for the South Africa region, reaching out to other countries in that zone, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and so on. We have also a regional office in West Africa. We just opened one for the MENA regions in Tunisia. Globeethics.net has developed offices around the world in Beijing, in China, in India, for example, in Bangalore, and going to the Far East in Indonesia, in Jakarta. We have offices in Latin America, in Argentina, and even in the US, in Ohio. In Europe, our seat is in Geneva. My dear friends, we have national contacts in over 48 countries at the moment. And the national contacts may not be regional, but they try to integrate that which we think belong to all of us as a human community, to integrate this ethics in the policies, which is very important, in the governance of institutions, in the management of institutions, and then of course, in the classroom. Ethics is not something alone in one area. You talk about bioethics, business ethics, philosophical ethics, family ethics, and you can go on and on, technological ethics. Recently, we are dealing with artificial intelligence. Not long ago in Dubai, it was machines that were acting as police officers on the roads and controlling people. And human beings were being controlled by machines, stand, move, and so on. But there must be an ethics also around this subject. Ethics is a subject that goes for as long as humanity is there, very, very far-reaching. It is a primary concern, of course, therefore, of society, of what and how we teach the young, the bearers of the future. I want to share also this knowledge, even before I go through the slides, that at Globe Ethics, we have the largest digital online library in the globe with over 120 million documents. Yesterday, in the offices of the postgraduate studies in education, I saw a stack of books, of research materials, of dissertations and theses of students. And I was asking myself, a student spends 2-3 years and writes a thesis, gives a copy to the teacher who passes for a master's, for a doctorate, for a bachelor's, keeps a copy for the faculty, probably one for the library, one for oneself. How does the entire global community share in those thoughts which have been developed in such places like this? So at Globe Ethics, we take your thoughts, preserve your privacy and property rights, and integrate them that they are read anywhere in the world. So this is an area we will be talking with the university to ensure that teachers can write Part of the problems we have in many African universities is that teachers, for example, even if they write, they cannot publish because they cannot pay, and even if they want to publish, the work goes through a lot of scrutiny and so on, that often it doesn't come in the fore, and you cannot progress if you don't publish enough, whether it's in scientific journals. Part of also the injustice many African countries suffer because they have no visibility and access to what makes work possible. Globe Ethics publications are part of our key. And I do think that even the content of this conference will become part of the next book we are going to do. And they add to your reputation. How come it that of 1,000 universities worldwide, you are struggling to find one African university on the list? Because the rankings are done with indices, empirical indices, much of which some universities in Africa do not pass. This is where I feel that we must capacitate those who are in charge of these things. Before I forget, it will be made known again in the next days, and I've told it to some of the university vice chancellors here present. Globe Ethics will be organizing an international conference in June this year. We will be sending to those of you who have our card, who give us your cards, we will be sending you invitations to join at that palaver, a round table on discussing the management and teaching of ethics in higher education, strengthening those who participate with skills, with resources, and with content. You cannot be left out of such global meetings. Globe Ethics also makes it possible for those who come to converge, to share, to network, and even some of these problems when we talk about financial gaps. Such opportunities create financial access, because it is not that there is no money in the world, there is too much of it, but money is very shy. It goes only to where it finds people who are courageous to invite it. So take the bull by the horns and play that courage. If you are shy as money is shy, it will not reach you. I will now like to glance through the slides which we have before us. Why ethics still matters for the world. We don't need to say much more about it. You know more than myself that landing in Japan 2 weeks ago, I took a taxi that brought me to my hotel, and then someone in the lounge, it was a very important meeting, a global conference of the IIRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council, and someone had just forgotten big cash in another car with which he came, upwards of $5,000 US in cash in a taxi. As I was standing in the lobby, that money was brought by the taxi driver to the hotel, and it was brought to the 38th floor and handed over to the owner, one point in Japan. This is my glasses which I wear. I left it at the lobby of the hotel in Japan, took my flight back to Geneva because I forgot it. Within 4 days, a DHL Express sent me my glasses. I want to find out whether this is what happens elsewhere. Will you find $5,000 and look for the owner? I'm talking to ethics professors. Now, I go back again to Japan, not for the sake of comparison, but for the sake of stating that here in this world, a few things are possible. 40 million people live in Tokyo, but the police announces that they do not have one case of stealing in 365 days. And the newspapers carry a big page, Nairobi, not Nairobi. And I was wondering, and this is a newspaper printed here in Kenya, but it is visible because through the online you read anything that is published everywhere. Not to talk of Nigeria, where I come from. There we have a PhD in these kinds of things. So why does ethics matter? Think about it. Ethics matters because it is in your own personal interest to live virtuously. That should be the shortest answer. And ethics, simply put, is that process, method, an art of thinking and doing the right thing. The United Nations has its headquarters just opposite my office in Geneva. Globe Ethics is a member of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, the heads of states of various countries, including Uhuru's Kenyatta of Kenya, he was there to sign with all the other countries of the world the famous 17 Sustainable Goals of the United Nations. The United Nations is the highest body coming after 2 bloody world wars to guarantee global peace and security and to ensure that human rights are protected and human beings everywhere can live together. Kofi Annan was Secretary General of the United Nations until 2000, who started the so-called MDGs 2000 to 2015. When he stepped out, Ban Ki-moon, his successor, came out not with 8 MDGs, but with 17 SDGs. And I'm sure that part of what you teach your students is to look at these. For some of us who are Christians, we found that the SDGs and the SDGs repeat the Gospel of Matthew. I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was homeless, and everything about these values, education, health, infant mortality, and so on, the SDG is learning very well. But they are making out of Jesus 8 blessed 17 this time. The SDGs has won. Number 4, we talk seriously, and the UNESCO is part of it. And of course, we talk seriously about that no one be left behind as far as education is concerned. There is the framework for action, which many of you know. The Sustainable Development Goals, I will recommend that you take little time to Google through it, just for the sake of knowledge, because it makes you know that what you do in your various places can key into one of these. And the amount of funding that goes to governments and to institutions, including private institutions, is enormous. Living in Geneva and seeing the type of philanthropy around that place shows us that when you go into a coalition for good, money will follow you. Some people think, I don't have the funds, so I don't start. Please start. The other things will come with it. I do not want to dwell very much more on the Sustainable Development Goals, but there is a level of world poverty which is not acceptable. Explain to me that in a world like in ours, 48,000 children die every day on this continent. And they die not because of a war, they die because they have no bread to bite. At a time when weapons are being produced in massive forms, people have no bread and no milk to eat. 48,000, no medicine, no care, no home. The world has 65 million refugees, and Africa boasts of almost 50% of them. So when you like to talk about poverty at any international forum, you just look for the dark face, because we represent poverty in everything. And this is surprising, because the largest resources of water in the universe is found on the African continent. The largest agricultural lands in anywhere in the world, 80% of agricultural lands is found on the African continent. When you think about the numbers of young people who are below the ages of 30, and almost 75 to 80% of them that are found on the African continent. When you think about culture and music and art and dance and celebration, they are found on the African continent. So how can those, and how come that those who have wealth and all that makes wealth maximize itself become the poorest of the poor? I come born originally in a country called Nigeria. We have oil, gas. We are number 1, we are number 6 for crude oil worldwide. But go to Nigeria on any of the streets, they are standing on the roads looking for petrol to buy. And the prices of petrol are even higher. And you keep on wondering, what's happening here? Of course, there must be a question concerning ethics and values, because once it starts getting it lacks things, you start seeing that the world poverty is growing. The reasons for poverty is not because you do not have, but sometimes also because you do not manage. The Human Development Index shows it also. This is an area where you discover that when you think about how long do people live, the oldest human being in the world at this time is 127 years old, and it is a Japanese. The second is an Italian. I'm happy my friends from Focolare movement, I shook your hands before this meeting, Italian, and then you say, why do they live long? Why people live long depends on many things. But Human Development Index has to start with your environment. If you live in a dirty environment, you die in dirt. If you eat too much meat, and Friedrich Nietzsche was very good in saying that, those who eat meat, take note. Man is what he eats. So when they talked about being vegetarian, and I saw it in Asian countries, countries with the least indices of cancer in Asia, because of what they eat. So I do think that the Human Development Index can be discussed when we access ourselves to more knowledge and better knowledge, which education brings about. Africa holds the lowest Human Development Index in 2015 and even in 2016, and not to talk of Kenya. You will know, of course, the statistics of your country much more than I do, but it is a pleasure to see that people in Europe, when the weather is very cold there, they think about a place to go for holidays that is peaceful, that is organized, that has nice beaches, whether it's in Mombasa or climbing the mountains, and Kenya offers this kind of thing. But when I go to the UK and I want to drink tea, they give me Lipton tea. And when I ask how does it come about, I discovered that this Lipton tea comes from the Kericho tea fields. Now, I go to the Kericho tea fields and see those who work on the tea plantations, and they have not enough money to send their children to school. They are struggling to survive. The same happens in South Africa and in many other countries that are colonial. But the products from their farms come back to them as if they cannot appreciate what they produced. And this is a question on governance, country to country. The lowest and poorest African countries in Chad, in Niger, in Mali. And I was sitting on the plane with a gentleman from Niger, and he told me that they have gold, unquantifiable quantities of gold. And I said, but you are the poorest country in the world. He said, ask me. On 26th February 2018, the Transparency International Corruption Index was published. And you will see where Kenya is on the line. I think we are competing favorably with Nigeria, not only about football. You normally lose in football, but at least in corruption, you are better than Nigeria. And what does corruption mean? Corruption simply means shooting yourself on the foot. Because for every unethical behavior, you suffer from it. How come that a country like Japan lives on an island? You go to Norway, the same thing. To Sweden, the same thing. Often they say zero corruption. I went to eat in Tokyo, and after eating, I gave a tip to the servants who'd given me food, and they returned my money to me. And I said, sorry, please. They said, we don't give tip here. I said, but you served me. He said, I did my work. And then I went to a restaurant to eat 2 nights ago here in Kenya. And when I finished eating, and I thought I was still in Nairobi, in Tokyo, the lady said, have you never heard about tip? I said, I don't know what it is. Is it Arabic or English? What does that mean? Once you allow tip, it has no level to stop. So it's either you develop a culture that has no tip, but that is very difficult. Definitely it has happened in some countries. You don't give tip in Sweden, you don't give tip in Norway, you don't give tip in Japan, you don't give, and there are countries where you give tip, you even go to jail. But a politician in some of our African countries will tell you, see me later. And corruption has started. See me, you know what it means. In some countries we use the term brown envelope. So you see me with the brown envelope. It can be a cow or some cash. And it happens now that even in the citadels, where you have the best educational institutions, in the citadels, you have to pay to become a professor. You have to arrange to climb in terms of, I mean, when we want to talk about corruption, I will just give you some of the pictures of corruption, because this is an area where we cannot hide in terms of the facts on ground. I just want to mention them to you in a very few words. Corruption, plagiarism. I'm a teacher, I'm a student, I have to do a research. I copy what another person has written and put my name there. But I am not an armed robber, but I stole with my beak in my room and put my name on somebody else's research. Or you think about examination malpractice, or you think about the growing cases of unethical research practices, or think even about nepotism. What's your name? Okay, I use the name to see why I should advance this person over another person. Blood relations, village person, and so on. And not to talk about the many levels of sexual harassment. These ones have come to the public, and it cuts across all the levels. We are discussing corruption. And some people level corruption only when it has to do with exchanging money or doing all those other things in economy, business. The lack of even ethics curricula and application of codes of conduct. When I ask a student, what is the code or the vision or the mission or the value of your institution? Say, the mission statement, I don't know. The value statement, I don't know. A senator was being screened at the plenary of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And he was told, can you tell us the code of arms of the Nigerian government? You are going to be a senator. He said, code of arms. What language is? Can you say it in my village language? It was translated, and he said, code of arms. I know that I have arms like this. And they do not know. The vision of an institution like CUA is probably not known to even the teachers and professors, talk less of the values. So these are where you have to start, because when you are not synchronous with them, you have the problems. There is a shallow of poorly trained human resources, and of course the lack of adequate facilities you will talk about. Insufficient funding is always blamed, but corruption is the cancer which all of us see. And these massive cases of corruption need actually to be addressed. These are the indices Transparency International and others use to discuss that corruption can be wiped out. And you need not just the laws, you have to do with getting into, that's what, for example, the Christian churches do, the religious organizations do, that they talk about healing from within. That is not just what you learn, because most of those who are corrupt people, the bankers and so on, have gone to university. There's the internal transformation that matters. Now, talking about internal transformation, we want to talk about the local context for sustainable development. I mean, like I said, in terms of Kenya, they have a high rate of literacy, but they have also a high rate of corruption. So what did the literacy achieve? That I can read and write, but I can also do the wrong things, has not made my being educated qualified. Because the man who led us in prayer this morning, God bless him, in quoting Thomas of Aquinas, he talked about sapientia, which is wisdom, but also about character, which goes with it. And that's why a bird flies with 2 wings. The aeroplane flies with 2 wings. It's not just that of knowledge. Sanctity is part of it. And it's not only sanctity, which we call probably, for example, holiness or wholeness or completeness. It is virtue and knowledge. And that is why here we have some good work to do. Permit me to run and leave the figures on Kenya and its rural development and talk about the role of universities in developing countries. Just about 1 month ago, as we were preparing to come for this conference in Kenya, we were told that the regulatory authorities were already sanctioning some universities in Kenya on governance issues, on other problems in terms of what the regulator finds according to the laws of the country. And we started discovering that actually universities can become the citadels for vice and not for virtue. There are countries where state universities dominated the plenary for a long time, only state universities. But then the numbers, the massive demographic change, numbers of people being put into the world was, and of course the access to education that was growing, made it impossible for the state with its resources to cope. So they started going by virtue of democracy, by virtue of deregulation, by virtue of privatization, and by virtue of competition, they started allowing that private universities could be licensed. This is modern. It has not been the case in African continent for a long time. And by licensing the private universities, there was hope that competition will enter. And there are countries where you will notice, of course, that the private universities are much, much better than the public universities. By having little resources and maximizing them much more. I worshipped on Sunday in St. Paul's Catholic Chaplaincy. The numbers of young people who came from us, the activities around there, and they told me this university opposite is always on strike. The teachers finish strike, the students start. The students finish, the non-academic staff start their own. So 12 months in the year, probably they are in class for 4 months, the rest is striking. And I kept on asking myself, do the private universities also do the same? They say normally not, but they are learning that bad habit. In another country, Nigeria, not one private university has striked in the past 10 years, not one. So many families send their children to private universities, which prices, of course, are different because the private universities don't receive official or public resources except the licensing and but there is something about the university and the role of universities in developing countries. It is that role of being the best of who we are and what we are and what we must be, of creating the next generation of people. A university in the encyclopedia of, for example, the Christian churches, I'm happy that the first speaker from Amasia tried also to mention some of the documents, Gravissimum Educationis. It talks about not just the gravity of education, but the university is the citadel that builds up culture, that builds up humanity, that builds up knowledge, and that builds civilization. And that is why it is called universitas, universe. It's not a place that is closed. It is the openness for talent, for innovation, for youth, and for leadership. This is the role of the university. And here we ask, can it do those works without integrating ethics in higher education? Allow me therefore to say that the training objective for our coming together here is to, it is not that teachers don't know that ethics is important. They do know, but they lack the knowledge, the awareness, the capacity, the skills, the resources to transmit them. We are talking about the more formal things, not the other one that Vice Chancellor Professor Eustace Mbe spoke about. You do not lack to be a model. That's why you don't need to learn. You just be a good person wherever you are. The situation between teachers and students, teacher-student relationship is something we want to focus on. What does that mean? The situation of doing research and conducting research to become globally competitive is something we want to address. The entire thing about even knowing the substance of ethics in its normative, in its empirical dimensions is something a conference like this will address. And I'm grateful to Arigato, All the way from Sri Lanka, Suchit came to join us. We are partnering with that organization. And they talk not even about ethics in education, they discuss a more fundamental idea, ethics education. These are the types of things we are going to share. Professor Chidi Onyia has been teaching in California. He's one among the team here. And as a teacher himself, as a curriculum developer, as a professor in education, you will really listen to him talk about leadership, which teaching brings to you, and the transformation of faculties completely. So, or Nadia Balgobin, who will be talking about even the management of ethics in an institution, not just a university, but even in a business. Because your students, when they leave here, they go to start their businesses. These are part of the things we think we are going to give. Well, the slides we've made available to you, I don't want to waste too much of your time. The slides we've made available to you, and of course we're going to come out with a publication. But not only for teachers, but also for students, there are a lot of outcomes. The outcomes are many, and you cannot say that, like I said before, somebody is in Africa in wealth and says, I'm poor. Or you have this opportunity and say, well, I have other things to do. My people have a proverb, and that was about the chicken, the small fowl. There was a meeting of all the animals, I think it was in Kilimanjaro. And they were all to go because there were no rains, no sunshine. And he said, please come, let's go and have. Lion invited all of them. And all the animals were going for that meeting. But then the chicken, as the fowl, was going the opposite direction. And the others were saying, we are going for a meeting, a convention of all the animals. Why are you going? So whatever you discuss there is good for me. So when whatever you discuss, you can take my vote. So when they reached there, they said they must make a sacrifice of one animal. So that when they kill this animal, then the rains will come and the weather will be good. So the tortoise immediately mentioned, why can't we take the chicken or the fowl? The fowl was not there to defend itself. And since that day, everywhere you see the fowl, it is meant to be eaten and slaughtered. Have you noticed it? Go to any Chinese restaurant. Go anywhere, the fowl is always being slaughtered till today because it was not present to answer and defend itself. So they always lose who are absent. When your families make a family meeting, try to be present, don't protest. Because when they go there, they will vote and put a tax on you for being absent and decide things you don't like if you are present. And even those gossiping about you, when they see you, they will close your mouth. But when you pass, they continue. Because when they see the truth, they cool down. So don't be the chicken whom we shall slaughter after this conference. Try to be present. Ladies and gentlemen, the outcomes will be part of what many of you will be seeing and also sharing. I want to think that a paradigm shift is important. A paradigm shift in the way we manage universities, in the way we manage families, in the way we manage governance. Globe ethics focuses on economic ethics, on political, on environmental and technical, and of course on research and education. For the next 3 years, we are building a consortium on research and education. That's why I feel that some of you who are willing from other institutions, I mean Nadia and Ignace, Dr. Ignace who is here, they can engage you in terms of making you sign the consortium agreement. That is, you want to be a member of the Consortium on Ethics in Higher Education. It comes with it a lot. And I just wanted to mention some of those a lot, which will be the last thing that my paper, my presentation this morning will bring to you. What will be that a lot, which you will be sharing from globeethics.net? For example, you can have your financial challenges mitigated by virtue of sharing in the knowledge and the resources of other institutions that are part of the consortium and are looking for partners. Every time we are getting invitations, do you know teachers who want to do a one-year external internship or professorship in our university? This is a possibility for you to have exchange programs with other institutions. I've spoken about research partnerships which are developing and have them. We can also share in the publications like I mentioned before. The library is there for you, and I'm grateful to Elizabeth and Herbert and Father Gichire and others, Peter Mbaro, and the university that tries to access its library here, even for the use of students. Just you need to Google www.globeethics.net. For free, you go to any of the websites and read that, research on that, which you want to do. Right now, we are discussing distance and online learning. It's growing. Many people don't need to enter a classroom. They sit in their homes and go to school and get certificates. But even then, Globe Ethics, which is the largest digital online platform for ethics in higher education, will be in a position to support you. And then, of course, the certification programs on ethics. If you attend a course, you get a certificate. You are certified. Employers like IBM, I'm sure I met one of theirs here, employers want to employ people who are qualified. But you get a faster qualification if there is behind you a reputation, a good name, a good certificate that you are also ethical or that you are a person of value. The training of trainees and the empowerment, the joint educational projects which you can do with other institutions. The rankings of universities is an area we are now challenging because we think we must expand the scope of ranking to even include ethical competitiveness. Green campuses are not just the amount of, the buildings or the teachers or faculty and all the other things they use for ranking professors. I do feel that we are in good soil during these days. I want to thank you for your grand and patient attention. I do look forward to a collaboration beyond the next 4 days. God bless you.